Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel where I, Adrena Anderson, let you in on my life. You will be exploring my hobbies, my family, and just getting inside my head a little bit. But before we go on and get into today's cooking tutorial, I just want to remind you guys to please subscribe to the channel, like, comment, interact with me in the comments. I love your feedback. I love to know what you guys like, what you guys would like to see more of. That's really important for me and my growth for this channel. So now that we've kind of got the introductions all wrapped up, let's get into today's recipe. Today we're making homemade buttermilk biscuits. This is one of my favorite recipes. I have perfected this recipe. If I'm being honest, these biscuits are foolproof. They could be packaged up and put on a shelf in a grocery store because they are that perfect. I'm ready to finally give you guys my tips and tricks as to how I come up with the perfect homemade buttermilk biscuits. They don't take long. You literally can make these on a Saturday morning, which is what I usually do for the family. Also, if you host brunch, this is a really good item to go ahead and put on your menu. They taste perfect and people are going to think that you just spent hours in the kitchen, preparing this meal, when in reality it only took you about like 25 minutes. So let's get into making these biscuits. So I've already went ahead and prepared out my ingredients. So this here is 3 cups of organic flour. I do run mine through the flour mill just to get out any chunks. A key to when you are measuring out your flour, don't take the measuring cup and scoop it directly into the flour because it's going to be packed in there and you're probably going to end up with more flour than you need and it's going to throw off your ratios for your recipe and your biscuits may not taste as good. So what I typically do is I get a spoon and I spoon the 3 cups into the measuring cup. That way it's more accurate. If you want, you can measure out in grams. A quick Google search will tell you about how many grams is 3 cups of flour. I cannot speak today. So I run my flour through the mill. This just takes out any lumps and chunks that are in your flour. And before you start this step, what you can do is go ahead and preheat your oven. My oven is preheated to 450. The biscuits cook in about 12 minutes, so it doesn't really take too long. Okay, next I'm going to continue to add my dry ingredients. I am going to do baking powder. So this is 4 teaspoons of baking powder. This is a half a teaspoon of baking soda, 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt, and sugar is optional, but I like to add sugar to my biscuits. I measure with love. I do not have a precise measurement here, so you don't want them to be too sweet. So I don't recommend anything over 2 tablespoons, I'm sorry. You are going to, I'm just gonna use my measuring cup, you're just gonna whisk this all together. So mix this up. And these biscuits aren't sweet at all. They are very buttery, flaky, warm, salty, everything you want from a biscuit. These biscuits have that. Next is our butter. We are going to take 12 tablespoons of butter. So it's a stick and about half of one. The key to your butter, it has to be cold, cold, cold. You do not want the butter to melt inside of your flour mixture. So I always freeze my butter. That way the longevity of the coldness lasts. So I start to just thinly slice this down, and keep in mind the more you touch the butter with your hands, the heat from your hands is going to kind of melt it down. So I try to just keep my hands off the butter as much as possible. I've seen some people shave butter with a cheese grater into their flour mixture. I've tried it before, not since I perfected my recipe, so I don't know what type of results that yields or not. I just dice my butter up. I do like it this way. This recipe is a recipe that I'm very proud of. So I believed I started the idea to make my own homemade biscuits came to me last summer, so summer of 2022. And I remember the first time I tried them. They looked like scones. They just the flavor was there. I don't think I was too off by the flavor, but the look and the feel and the texture, it just, you could tell that it lacked technique. So I tried to make them a couple times and I just got really frustrated. I mean, I watched YouTube videos, I read, I went on Pinterest, found multiple recipes, and they just were not coming out to my liking. So I took a break. I took a step back and I stopped trying to make the biscuits. I felt that if the time were right, when the time were right, I would go back to the drawing board and I would figure out how to make the perfect biscuits. And I did. I had a really unique opportunity to actually watch someone who's probably been making homemade biscuits from scratch for about 50 years do it. So my good friend, her mother was in town, and she's a big cook, just kind of like me. She's a foodie. She loves to make things from scratch. And she told me that she would be making biscuits. And I just went out on a whim and I asked her if she would mind if I came over and watched her make her biscuits. She was like, sure. She was like, you have to. I'll be making my biscuits at 6 in the morning. She was like, come on over. I'll walk you through my process. I got up at like 5 something in the morning. I had to get ready because I was going for a 6-mile run after. And my reward was gonna be to come back and eat the biscuits. It was a really cool experience. She walked me through kind of how she made her biscuits, the technique that she used, because there is a little technique that you have to use to make sure that your biscuits rise the way that you want. And it was honestly what I needed in order to perfect the biscuits. I went home the next day, bought all the ingredients, made my own biscuits, and they were perfect. Like, needed to change nothing. They were absolutely perfect. And that was one of the greatest cooking experiences I've ever had, is for someone to share their knowledge with me and allow me into their space and to kind of absorb years and years of their craft. So that was pretty cool. Okay, so the next step here is we are gonna take a pastry cutter. If you do not have a pastry cutter, which I highly recommend if you're gonna make this recipe quite a bit, to get one. You can use 2 forks, mash it up. You can use your hands, but remember what I said about your hands. That moisture or the heat from your hands is going to soften that butter a lot sooner and melt it down, and you don't want that. And we are gonna mash this butter up until it's like crumbly. It should resemble peas, like peas and carrots type peas. So you're getting here really good. This is a really good arm workout. Whoever says you don't work out in the kitchen, they were not being honest. This is definitely a workout. Biscuits, they get a little messy. They get a little messy, but it's okay. It's easy to clean up. It's fun getting messy in your kitchen. You're like really putting your hands and cooking your food with love. And I guarantee you, it's probably one of the main reasons why this recipe tastes so good, is because it's truly crafted with love and just you're putting hard work into these biscuits. I mean, I'm sweating, so that's like real life sweat equity that's going into making these biscuits. So I started cooking these at 12:26. It's 12:39. So, and we're just pretty much about done. We don't have many steps left. So this is super easy. And 12 minutes of your cook time is oven time. So I like to make a little well in the middle for my buttermilk. So I literally just, you know, scrape it to the side. You want your ingredients to be cold. All of your ingredients cold. So your butter, your buttermilk, you want nice cold ingredients. The next step is to add your buttermilk. So the recipe calls for 1 1/4 cup, but if I'm gonna be honest, I start off with a cup because you don't want your biscuits to be too moist and soggy. So start off with a cup, better safe than sorry, and you can always add as you go. So I add my buttermilk to the well. Start to work your buttermilk into your flour mixture. I do a nice little C shape here. You don't want to overmix. You want to be really gentle. I highly recommend a rubber spatula. This is going to definitely need the 1/4 cup of buttermilk. And sometimes you have to add this because sometimes it will require a little bit more than the 1 1/4 cup, but you do not want to over add. So if your mixture is like dry, it should be slightly sticky. Like this is very dry. So I'm gonna go ahead and just add this additional 1/4. Your dough shouldn't be like soggy or moist. It should just have a nice stickiness to it. So now we are gonna lightly toss our working surface with some flour. We are gonna start working in our biscuit dough. So if you find that your dough starts to stick to your hands too much, just add a little flour. So get some flour on my hands, and yeah, you're just gonna start forming this into a ball. If you need to add more flour as you go, feel free to do that. You don't want to overwork this, so I try to get it into that ball fairly quickly, just because you want to be gentle. You don't want to overwork it and it take away from the way your dough rises. Alrighty, and then now we will start working this out into layers. So I like to layer mine pretty thick. So my biscuits are usually some thickums. They're pretty thick. I like a nice, thick, buttery biscuit. So I flatten mine out with my hands. I don't use a rolling pin. Just a little bit more flour. So the next step, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take a little extra flour and put it on my biscuit shaper. If you don't have a biscuit press, you can use the rim of a glass. Just put a little flour on it and it's gonna give you the same biscuit shape. So the trick to your biscuits, when you're pressing your biscuits out, you want to press firmly and lift straight up. You do not want to twist, you do not want to turn. If you twist and turn, it's going to affect the way that your biscuits rise and you're not going to have that same biscuit. So be very mindful that when you press your cup or your biscuit press down, you're pressing straight down into the dough and you're lifting straight up. Don't overthink it, it's super simple. My 2-year-old Tyler can do it, I'm sure you can do it as well. But before we go on, I take butter and I just butter my baking sheet. I've seen some people use parchment paper, but unfortunately I do not, because the smoke point on parchment paper I think is like 400 degrees, so 450 is just too high. So the smoke point is basically saying that once the parchment paper is baked at a certain temperature, it starts to release like toxic materials, and I just don't want that in my body or in my family's body. So I just butter this up really good. If you don't want the bottom of your biscuits to brown at all, you could put a little bit of heavy cream on the bottom. I don't do that personally. You can brush the bottom of your biscuits with heavy cream or the top to prevent them from browning, but I just let mine do what they do. The brown bottoms don't bother me. Now we're gonna start to press our biscuits. So I typically start right close to the edge. I press down, lift straight up. That's one. I press down. I go right near the edge, so where this one ends, the next one is gonna begin. You wanna make sure you get the most out of your dough. Press down, lift straight up. So where that one ended, press down, lift up. And you can freeze the rest. Super easy to freeze. I freeze them in the shape of the biscuit and I come back to them later. And you're just gonna repeat that process. Gonna roll it out, flatten it out to your thickness of your choosing, and you're gonna go in and press and lift. I'm actually gonna save some of these biscuits frozen for a homemade pot pie recipe, chicken pot pie recipe. It's gonna be so delicious. I am gonna post it to the channel, so I promise I wouldn't tease you guys like that just to not give you the recipe. So now we are gonna pop these into our oven. We're gonna set the timer for 11 minutes. And relax until your biscuits are done. Alrighty, our biscuit timer has gone off. Oh man, look at that. Amazing. And just like that, you have fluffy homemade biscuits. I moved these to a cooling rack because this will continue to cook your biscuits because it's still hot. But what beautiful biscuits. These beautiful. Let them cool for a couple minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, and then you can enjoy. You can have them with extra butter on them. You can put jelly, your favorite jam on them. You can do, my favorite is a homemade bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit. You can do chicken biscuits, homemade biscuits. The possibilities are endless is ultimately what I'm trying to say. These are the best biscuits that you can make. Foolproof, follow my directions step by step. You won't mess these up, I guarantee you. Don't be intimidated by biscuits like I was. I spent entirely too long not making such a beautiful, delicate recipe because I was afraid, and lo and behold, it's a recipe that I've completely mastered. Alrighty, here goes another. Let's get in here. Look at that, look at those layers. Oh, that's a fluffy, oh, look at that steam. You guys, what? Oh, it's just such a good, you can see the butter in there. I'm dropping it all on the floor. These are just amazing. Flaky, fluffy, the best. That's a biscuit. That is a biscuit. Oh my God. I wish you guys could taste this through the camera. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode and making homemade buttermilk biscuits with me. I'm really glad that I got to share one of my favorite recipes with you guys. It is my hope that you try them out. Don't forget to comment below. Let me know how your biscuits came out. Let me know what you think of the recipe. Is there anything that I could have explained to you all better to make this a better experience? Either way, make sure you subscribe because more recipes like this are on the way.